I'm not mad at anybody. I was sure I would be. I never thought I was coming home. I was sure hopeful. I prayed for it all of the time. I didn't need a miracle. I just needed the truth.
While Pete Coones was on his way to drop his kids off at school, his morning took a dramatic turn when police officers pulled him over. To his shock, he was promptly arrested for a double homicide. It all began with a phone call the previous morning.
Peter's here in the house, and he said he stole the lawnmower. He said he's going to kill Carl. And he said he's going to kill me, and he said he has his tracks covered where no one will know who did it.
Peter, or Olin Pete Coones Jr., was someone Kathleen Schroll knew. Kathleen was familiar with elderly care, having tended to Olin Coones Sr., Pete's father. Olin Sr., in his 80s and grappling with dementia, leaned on Kathleen for support. When he passed away in January 2007, he left his entire estate to Kathleen, sparking a bitter legal battle between Pete and Kathleen. Kathleen felt confident she would emerge victorious. However, Pete had other plans.
Sister just called, and she's had some run-ins with this one guy. She called him sister. He's there trying to kill her and her husband. He's there now, and she said he's breaking in with a gun in his hand.
Okay, and the guy that's supposed to be there, the suspect, what's his name, or do you know?
What's his name? Pete Coones?
After the call, Kathleen's mother contacted the police, leading them to Kathleen and her husband's lifeless bodies. Surprisingly, there were no signs of forced entry into the home, no shattered windows or other indications of a break-in. Adjacent to Kathleen's body lay a .36 revolver. Initially, the police speculated that Kathleen had committed a murder-suicide, taking her husband's life before her own. However, Kathleen's mother arrived and disputed this theory, claiming she had just received a call implicating Pete as the perpetrator of the murders. What initially appeared to be a tragic case of murder-suicide swiftly transformed into a double homicide. So, on the morning of April 8, 2008, while Pete was driving his children to school, authorities apprehended him. Approximately 9 months later, in January 2009, Pete faced trial. The motive behind the heinous act stemmed from Pete's hatred towards Kathleen, who he believed had wrongfully taken his inheritance. Their past encounters had been contentious, but this confrontation reached a tragic climax. During the trial, Kathleen's mother testified, recounting the call Kathleen had placed before abruptly being disconnected. Pete's defense emphasized the absence of physical evidence tying him to the crime scene, no fingerprints on the gun, and no DNA evidence. Additionally, Pete's wife testified that he had been in bed throughout the entire night, providing an alibi for the accused. His daughter recalled seeing him in the house at 2:20 a.m. during Kathleen's call, noting he urged her to bed before hearing him on the computer. So, with Pete seemingly cleared by his family's testimonies, who did it? Could it have been a murder-suicide? But Kathleen was on the brink of winning a legal battle over Olin Coones' estate. The jury deliberated for 2 days, and their verdict was anything but conventional. They found Pete Coones guilty of Kathleen's murder but not guilty of killing Carl. Pete was sentenced to life in prison. The legal outcome suggested he had murdered Kathleen, regardless of his protestations. Yet, doubts lingered about Kathleen's portrayal as an angelic figure during the trial. Pete's family, following his incarceration, argued she had exploited Olin Sr.'s vulnerability. Olin Sr.'s condition, afflicted with Alzheimer's, added a troubling dimension to the case. There were signs of possible abuse when Pete met his father after a while, with bruises and scratches suggesting mistreatment, possibly at the hands of his caregiver, Kathleen. Despite Pete filing an elder abuse claim against Kathleen, no repercussions ensued. Nearly a year later, Pete was granted a new trial upon the revelation that the prosecution had withheld evidence. His daughter's testimony regarding his computer activity on the fateful night was corroborated by computer records, placing him at home during the shootings. This bolstered the defense's case. However, the prosecution also gained strength with a new witness, a jailmate of Pete's.
The inmate's name, who are we talking about?
AKA Pete.
Pete, okay.
He told me that he thought about doing something to these people and nobody was going to be able to figure out he did it. He told me that he thought about it for quite a long time, about doing something to these people, about what they did to his dad, and nobody was going to be able to figure out he did it.
Did he indicate to you how he exited his house in order not to alert or stir anyone within the home?
He told me that he went out the bedroom window, that he had a hard time getting out the bedroom window. He claims that he was like real big at the time, but he was laughing about it. But he finally got out the window. He said, I went over there in my Jeep. I didn't use my personal van, my family van. He also, in the same conversation, told me that he had his wife sell the Jeep to get rid of it so there wouldn't be around.
His account appeared questionable, claiming Pete, weighing over 250 pounds at the time, had snuck out of the window. Moreover, the informant alleged Pete drove his Jeep to the murder site, despite Pete having sold the vehicle months before the incident. Despite the informant's doubting testimony, Pete faced conviction once more. Years went by, until 2018, when a new district attorney took office and established a conviction integrity unit dedicated to probing potential wrongful convictions. Shedding light on new revelations unearthed by several attorneys and the Midwestern Innocence Project, it emerged that Carl bore a bruised face that fateful night, initially assumed to be from Pete's alleged assault. However, the discovery of an additional bullet suggested the bruising might have resulted from a grazing bullet instead. This highlighted that Carl's injuries were solely caused by gunfire. The gun, devoid of Pete's DNA or fingerprints, bore Kathleen's instead. Gunshot residue was discovered on her left hand, indicating her proximity to the firearm. Subsequently, the jail informant confessed to fabricating his testimony, driven by the desire for a reduced sentence. It later surfaced that the prosecution coerced his confession, threatening him with additional jail time if he did not comply. And then, new information regarding Kathleen's actions emerged, confirming Pete's suspicions. She had indeed been exploiting Olin Sr., a fact known by Pete, and soon to be acknowledged by the law. Kathleen's alleged mistreatment of Olin Sr. extended beyond physical abuse to include financial exploitation. She systematically isolated him from his family and gained control over his finances. In the year leading up to Olin Sr.'s passing, a troubling pattern emerged. Over a span of 6 months, checks totaling over $28,000 were written out to Kathleen from Olin's account, with an additional $12,000 withdrawn. Moreover, he acquired a new credit card, and Kathleen was added to the deed of the house. The bank eventually froze Olin's account due to suspicious activity, but by then, there was nothing left. Kathleen's manipulation of Olin Sr. included becoming the beneficiary of his life insurance, done without proper authorization. Pete's lawsuit against her wasn't due to personal exclusion from the will, it stemmed from his concern over his father's abuse. Surprisingly, none of this crucial information surfaced during the trial, leaving the jury uninformed about Kathleen's extensive exploitation of Olin Sr.'s vulnerability. Cornered and desperate, Kathleen resorted to framing Pete Coones. She murdered her husband, then placed the blame on Pete by calling her mother and implying his involvement. Finally, she took her own life. In the end, the police's initial assessment of a murder-suicide proved accurate. With Pete incarcerated, all of Kathleen's assets would now pass to her daughter, completing a tragic and sinister scheme. She framed the son of the man she had been exploiting for her own gain, out of sheer spite. After enduring a long legal journey, Pete Coones finally found vindication in his third trial. In November 2020, he emerged as a free man. However, by that time, Pete was already sick. An undiagnosed and untreated lung cancer had ravaged his health during his time behind bars. Tragically, 180 days after regaining his freedom from a wrongful 12-year imprisonment, Pete Coones passed away on February 21, 2021, at the age of just 64. Kathleen's malevolence knew no bounds, she would never even get to see the outcome of her master plan. Just the satisfaction of knowing Pete's life was about to be in ruins was evidently enough for her.